Hi, in this video we're going to talk about creating the content that you need to put in your portfolio. Now, the process of creating a portfolio is really a process of identity creation. It's about creating an image of yourself online. It's about creating a professional image that will entice employers and will serve you throughout your career. And the way we focus this identity is around the idea of capabilities, about being able to prove there are certain things you can do, and sometimes those are skills, sometimes they are, I am able to, balance the books, or fix a gutter, or draft a will. But there are also other capabilities that includes things like honesty, or working in teams, or attention to detail. So when we're creating a portfolio, we want to pay close attention to creating evidence or collecting evidence of these capabilities and putting them within the portfolio. Now, one place to start thinking about this is to start looking at job ads and to start looking at the things people are asking for, because it's very hard to sit down and say, now, what am I good at? What are my particular skills? But if you can have a look at these jobs and start looking at some of the trends, then that will help you create, I guess, a short list of things that, number one, that you think you are good at, number two, that you think you've got evidence of, and number three, that you think employers also want. So if we have a look at a job ad, here's one for a legal secretary. A lot of people work as legal secretaries during their time as a student. You'll have a look at their sets of responsibilities. That gives you some idea of the sorts of things that they want, things like preparing correspondence, and other duties. But there are also capacities that they want: ability to multitask, excellent attention to detail, ability to prioritise work. Actually, that says ability to priorities work, which shows that there's probably some lack of attention to detail on whoever put this ad together. But let's leave that aside for the moment. So you come up with a list, and you don't want to have too many. 3 to 5 is probably plenty. And you also want to be able to look at the sorts of jobs that you'll be applying for now, but also, I guess, a view to the kinds of jobs you'll be applying for later. Because as you build your portfolio, you're going to want to be able to look at the long term. Okay, so once you've got an idea of what these key traits are, the things that you think you're good at, you think you're better to provide evidence for, the next thing is gathering the evidence itself. Now, you don't need too much. Again, you don't want to swamp people. You don't want it, and this is a problem a lot of CVs have, is that there's just so much in there. People just look at it and go, well, I don't know how any good any of this is. You want to put really good things in that people want to look at. Now, obviously, grades are one form of evidence that show that you can do certain things, but grades are not all that interesting, and people who there'll be a lot of people in your grade level who are going for the same job. So what you want to do is find really particular things and really specific things that are really good at showing a direct link between the things you claim you can do and the actual evidence. And one way to think about this is to think about the portfolios that creative people do, that artists or architects do. When you want to hire an architect and they bring in their portfolio, or more often it's online, but just think about a physical portfolio, and they open it and there's lots and lots of pictures of houses in it, and you think, well, I want this person to design a skyscraper for me. There's pictures of houses in there. They're lovely houses, but what does it prove? So you think about your audience, and you sort of think about the things that you include. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the potential things you might want to include in your portfolio. The first thing that people often include in portfolios is evidence of experience. Jobs you've done, whether they be paid jobs or volunteering or internships. And those jobs require you to do certain things that demonstrate and prove that you have certain capabilities. Now, this will often just have a link to the part of your portfolio where you describe your employment history. But employers then, if they wish to, can ask you referees from those previous jobs whether or not you actually were good at those things. Perhaps more tangibly, examples of work are things you can actually include as digital artifacts in the portfolio. Even if it's just a link to a document that you've uploaded, maybe on your Google Docs account. But these are real examples of things you can do and things that you've achieved. Other things you might want to include are awards. If you've won awards for anything, they're always good, and you can often either have a digital copy or maybe a scan of that in the portfolio. Participation in events. particularly if you're an organiser of the events, but it might be an event that you learnt something from, a training session. Maybe you did some online study in a MOOC. You may or may not have got a certificate as part of that, or a digital badge. But all those things are things that you can actually include, and you can include links in. So you might even link to the website of the original event. Contests, if you participated in a contest, that's also useful, particularly if they're related to the job that you're looking at. So within the law, there are things like mooting contests, where you practice your trial advocacy skills, and those are always good as well. And you can also include recommendations from individuals. It might be a letter of recommendation, but increasingly it's easy enough for someone to produce a short video that you can upload. Perhaps you've done some volunteering over a number of years somewhere, and the organiser of the volunteer service decides to just on their phone create a little video saying how great you are and how useful you are, and talks a little bit about your skill set. So all these things are things that we can link in. You don't include them in directly in your portfolio itself, but you include a link so that the person who's looking at it may decide to look at it in their own time. The next stage in all this is curation, and that's where you create the text in your portfolio where you link your capabilities to the actual evidence. So I've mentioned this before, I'm sure, but it's a bit like when you go to the museum and you see an artifact, an arrowhead, and you think that's an interesting arrowhead, but I don't know anything about it. And you read the curation text, and it tells you where it comes from, what it means, and what its significance is. It's the same with your portfolio. You might put in an award that you've received, and it may not be necessarily clear that the link that you're making between that award and your skill set. So you write something in there. So for instance, if you're looking at something like teamwork, and your evidence might be that you've organised a sporting event, you might put a link to your page about the sporting event, but then you might put a description of what you had to do in that organisation phase, what you had to organise, how many people, what it involved. Was there a financial aspect? Did you have to keep money? Did you have to plan? Did you have to schedule? All those sorts of things. And it's the same with communication, which is a notoriously difficult thing in job interviews, because they always say you have to be a great communicator. And then everyone says, I am a great communicator. It's very hard to, without a portfolio, provide a proper explanation. But here you can say, here is a document I provided to explain the law of trusts to lay people. And this is evidence of my capability, because this is a very complicated area of law and a lot of people don't really understand this particular aspect. So I put particular focus into making sure I could explain it. So this is the sort of thing that would be good to talk about on the forums or to talk about with your peers, but it's often a matter of using that curation text to create those links and those connections. And there are other things in your portfolio that also do that. So the things on your career aims, at your ethos, these are all things that create a sense of your identity and create a story from the person reading the portfolio who says, is this the sort of person I want to work with? And they read the story, and if you come out as someone they want to work with, that gets you up past a very important hurdle. So what next? We'll include some details later on what you can do to customize your portfolio. You can create sub-pages so that all the information isn't on one page, that's all nice and neatly organized so that the viewer can easily jump from section to section. We're not going to worry about that just yet because we just want to make sure you have the basics there, but there are things you can do within the portfolio. You can have practice with targeted selection interviews. This is the usual form of interviews that are used today, where employers say, these are the selection criteria. Can you give me an example of a situation when you were, for instance, asked to work in a team? One of the great things about portfolios is that you've already created that evidence, so that when you come to those interviews and they say that, you can say, well, actually, there's a really good example of that, and here it is. The other thing to think about when you're looking at your portfolio is, where are the gaps? Where are the things to add? They're always a work in progress, and you're always looking for better and more recent evidence to update. So if the latest piece of evidence you've got of being a team leader is a team captain in your hockey team when you're in high school, let's look at opportunities to show leadership in other contexts. Let's look at places where your work with volunteering and community engagement might include that. Let's look at things you might be able to do as part of the law program to take leadership and to create evidence of that. Other skills, you might want to go do short courses to fill those gaps. So It's not just a matter of this being a one-off document that you produce and there it goes. It's something you build over time, and it's a tool you use to reflect on your own abilities. And particularly when you do go to some job interviews and you get some feedback and they say, well, we didn't appoint you because we thought you were weak in these areas, then that's an opportunity to sit down and go, well, what can I do about that? How can I go and get some experiences that will create the right kind of evidence I need to fill my portfolio? So, it's now up to you.